Your right foot is flat on the floor. The needle is climbing past a number most engines never see. Your chest tightens. Somewhere under the hood, metal is moving faster than a bullet leaving a barrel, and it is not tearing itself apart. But it is closer to doing exactly that than you think. You feel it before you understand it. The engine note changes from a growl to a scream, a sound that seems to come from somewhere beyond mechanical possibility. Your hands grip the wheel a little tighter. This is 9,000 revolutions per minute. And the engineering happening inside that block right now is far wilder than anything you can hear. 9,000 revolutions per minute means every piston in that engine is changing direction 150 times a second. Stop. Reverse. Stop. Reverse. 150 times every single second for as long as you keep your foot down. Think about what that means for a piece of metal roughly the size of your fist. At the top of each stroke, that piston briefly experiences forces exceeding 2,000 times the pull of gravity. Your body would be paced at a fraction of that load. But this small aluminum cylinder does it thousands of times a minute and is expected to survive for years. Why does an engine even need to spin that fast? Power is a simple equation. Torque multiplied by RPM equals horsepower. If you cannot build enormous torque from a big heavy engine, you build power by spinning small light components faster. This is the entire philosophy behind high-revving naturally aspirated engines, and it traces directly back to a Japanese engineer named Yasuhiko Yamamoto and his design teams at Honda in the late 1980s. His obsession with variable valve timing was not about eking out a bit more fuel economy. It was about letting an engine breathe completely differently at low speed versus screaming speed, without physically swapping any hardware while the engine was running. The result became known as VTEC, and it fundamentally split how an engine behaves into two personalities living inside one block. At low RPM, the camshaft uses a gentle profile. Small lift, short duration, quiet manners, good fuel economy. But past a certain engine speed, oil pressure builds enough to push a locking pin sideways, physically engaging a completely different, far more aggressive cam lobe. The valves suddenly open further and stay open longer. More air rushes in, more fuel burns. The engine transforms in a fraction of a second, and you feel it as a shove in your back. A sudden second wind exactly when you expected the engine to start running out of breath. But breathing is only half the danger at these speeds. The other half is holding everything together. Every valve in that cylinder head is opening and slamming shut thousands of times a minute, and it is held onto its seat by a spring. At extreme RPM, that spring can begin to lose the fight against inertia. Engineers call it valve float. The valve stops fully closing before the next opening cycle demands it move again. When that happens, the piston, which is still climbing at incredible speed, can physically collide with a valve that failed to get out of the way in time. It is not a minor mistake. It is often a catastrophic engine-ending failure in less time than it takes you to blink. This is precisely why every high-revving engine has a redline, and why that redline is not some arbitrary number picked to look impressive on a spec sheet. It is the calculated limit where valve springs, connecting rods, and crankshaft bearings are still winning their fight against physics. Push past it, and something eventually loses. Consider the connecting rod, the piece of forged metal linking your piston to the crankshaft. At 9,000 revolutions per minute, that small rod is enduring tensile loads that would snap a steel cable of similar size used in construction. Every single revolution, it is stretched and compressed with violent force over and over, thousands of times per minute. This is why manufacturers who chase extreme RPM figures, from Honda's S2000 team to Ferrari's naturally aspirated V8 and V12 engineers, spend disproportionate amounts of their budget on metallurgy most drivers will never see or think about. Titanium connecting rods, forged, cracked, and balanced crankshafts. Lightweight, sodium-filled exhaust valves designed specifically to shed heat faster than solid steel ever could. Heat is the third enemy hiding inside every high RPM engine, and it might be the most dangerous of the three. Combustion happening thousands of times a minute generates temperatures inside the cylinder that can exceed 2,000 degrees Celsius in brief spikes. Metal expands under heat. Tolerances that were perfect when the engine was cold become dangerously tight when it is working at its limit. This is why racing engineers like those behind Cosworth's legendary Formula One power units obsess over oil temperature and coolant flow almost as much as they obsess over horsepower figures.